Have you ever sat beside a loved one in their final days and wondered, are they trying to tell me something? Not with words you understand, but with their silence, their gestures, or even a sudden mysterious sentence whispered in the dark. As a doctor who has spent over 4 decades working in end-of-life care, I've seen these moments more times than I can count. Families often come to me, overwhelmed and confused, asking, "What did that mean? Was it just the medication? Or were they really trying to say goodbye?" The truth is, the final chapter of life isn't always loud or dramatic. Most of the time, it speaks in a soft voice, a glance, a breath, a quiet request that gets overlooked in the noise of medical routines and emotional chaos. But those moments, they matter. And if we know how to listen, they can help us bring comfort, closure, and even healing. In today's video, I want to share with you 5 subtle, but powerful, deathbed signals that most families miss. These are real signs I've witnessed again and again as life gently begins to close its final page. And I promise you, once you learn to recognize them, you'll never look at goodbye the same way again. Now, let's begin with a sign that might feel strangely peaceful, but is often the very first whisper of farewell. It's something I've seen many times, and it still gives me pause every single time. After days, sometimes even weeks, of pain, restlessness, or confusion, the patient suddenly becomes peaceful. The face softens, the breathing becomes slower, more rhythmic. Sometimes they'll smile gently. Sometimes they'll open their eyes for the first time in days, look right at you, and speak with surprising clarity. Maybe even say something like, "It's going to be okay." To someone who hasn't witnessed death up close, it can feel like a miraculous recovery. Families often ask me, "Is she getting better? Could he be turning a corner?" And I always have to answer carefully, because this sudden calm isn't usually a sign of recovery. It's what we call terminal lucidity, a mysterious but very real shift that sometimes occurs in the final hours or days of life. Let me tell you about Robert, a former high school principal in his 80s. For 3 days, he had been mostly unresponsive, only muttering a few incoherent words here and there. His daughter had flown in from out of state and was heartbroken she couldn't talk to him before he passed. But then, on a quiet Sunday morning, something changed. He opened his eyes, looked straight at her, and said, "You made it." They talked for almost 20 minutes. He even laughed, once. He held her hand, told her he loved her, and asked her to take care of her mother. That night, he passed away peacefully in his chance to say everything that mattered. But here's the thing, not everyone gets that kind of closure. Sometimes families are so caught up in hope, or in calling the doctor, or adjusting medications, that they miss the moment for what it truly is. If you notice your loved one suddenly becoming calm after days of struggle, talk to them. Sit quietly. Don't rush to interpret it as medical improvement. It may very well be their way of preparing to go. Their body is letting go, but their spirit, it's trying to speak. This is the time to listen. You don't need the perfect words, just your presence. A held hand, a quiet "thank you" or "I love you" can mean everything. And if they do say something, write it down. You may want to remember it later. Many people I've worked with find great comfort revisiting those final words. It becomes a part of their healing. This sign, the sudden peace, is not something to fear. It's not false hope. It's the body of peace. It's the soul saying, "I'm ready." You'll never forget it. Now, let's move to a second sign, one that may seem unusual, even eerie at first, but carries more meaning than most people realize. It usually begins with a whisper, barely audible. You lean in, thinking they might be asking for water or a blanket. But instead, you hear them say something like, "Mom?" Or maybe they look past you, eyes wide but peaceful, and say, "He's here." Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they reach out, as if touching someone invisible. To an outsider, this might seem like hallucination. But to those of us who have worked in end-of-life care for decades, it's something we've learned to recognize, not as a delusion, but as a deeply human phenomenon. One of my patients, Eleanor, was a quiet woman in her late 70s. In her final days, she rarely spoke. But then, one morning, as her daughter sat by her side reading, Eleanor looked up and said softly, "Charlie's waiting for me by the tree." Charlie was her husband. He'd passed away 15 years earlier. She went on, describing in detail the way he looked, even mentioning the hat he used to wear during Sunday walks. That evening, she passed away in her sleep. Now, some people hear that and think it's just the brain misfiring, perhaps due to medications, low oxygen, or dementia. And yes, there is a clinical explanation, one that involves neurological pathways, the subconscious, and memory loops. But when you see it up close, when you witness the calm on their face, the warmth in their voice, the unmistakable sense that someone they loved is near, you begin to understand that this moment goes beyond biology. It's a form of emotional closure. It's the mind, the heart, and perhaps the soul aligning to make peace. I always tell families, don't interrupt. Don't try to reorient them to reality. Instead, join them where they are. If your loved one says, "I saw Dad today," you don't need to say, "Dad's gone." You can simply respond, "That sounds beautiful." What was he doing? Because in that moment, what they need most is not correction. It's connection. This sign, talking to the unseen, is often a way for the dying to bridge the world they're leaving and the one they're entering. It's a signal that something within them is preparing to let go, not with fear, but with a sense of reunion. And if you're lucky enough to witness it, take it as an invitation to be still. Listen, smile back, hold their hand and say, "You're safe, you're loved, you're not alone." Because even when we cannot see what they see, we can still choose to honor it, with presence, with peace, and with love. In the next sign, we'll explore something even more grounded, a request. Sometimes strange, sometimes surprising, but always meaningful. Sometimes a dying person will surprise you, not with tears or pain, but with a sudden, simple request. "Can you bring me my red scarf? I want to see the sunset today. Can I hear that old Johnny Cash song one more time?" To someone unfamiliar with end-of-life care, these might seem like random thoughts. But for those of us who've been at the bedside during hundreds of final hours, we've learned something important. These small, sometimes unusual requests are rarely meaningless. In fact, they are often the last threads a person is using to weave together the final moments of their life, to find comfort, to feel whole, to bring a sense of peace before letting go. Let me tell you about Manuel, a retired train conductor from New Mexico. He hadn't spoken much in days, but one afternoon, he opened his eyes, looked at his daughter, and said, "Take me outside. I want to feel the wind." It was early March, still a bit cold, but they bundled him up and wheeled his bed to the porch of the hospice home. The wind rustled through the cottonwoods, and for a few minutes he just closed his eyes and smiled. He passed away that night. His daughter later told me, "It was like he needed one last breath of the open air before he could leave." I've seen requests for one last bite of chocolate cake, a certain scent, lavender, pine needles, baby powder. I once had a patient ask to have her wedding ring placed back on her finger, even though it no longer fit quite right. She simply whispered, "He'll be waiting." These are not the ramblings of a failing mind. These are final acts of agency, of memory, of meaning. They are how the dying say, "This is how I want to go." Not always with fanfare, but with purpose. When a loved one makes a sudden or symbolic request near the end, try not to dismiss it as unimportant. Ask why. Listen with your heart. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, it makes perfect sense to them. And if you can, honor it. Because in that small act of listening, of following through, you give them a gift few people get in their final days, the dignity of being seen, heard, and respected. It may be the last decision they make for themselves. Let it be theirs. Next, we'll talk about a sign that often breaks the hearts of family members, a kind of silence, not of peace, but of withdrawal, when words fade and presence becomes still. It starts quietly. A missed reply, a distant look. A once chatty loved one becomes more inward, spending long stretches just lying still, eyes half closed, barely reacting to the world around them. This kind of silence is one of the most misunderstood signs of dying. Families often ask me, "Is she depressed?" Or, "Is he mad at us?" But in truth, this withdrawal isn't about sadness or anger. It's about surrender. I've seen it so many times. A patient who once loved visitors suddenly prefers to be alone. Conversations that used to bring joy now seem exhausting. The television stays off. The lights are dimmed. They turn away from food, from chatter, even from touch. And yet, there's no fear in their eyes, just stillness. This is not depression. It's not emotional shutdown. It's something deeper, what I call the turning inward. The body knows when it's time to rest. The spirit, too. In these final days or hours, many people begin to focus their energy inward, away from the noise of the outside world, and into a quieter, more sacred space within. It's as if their attention is shifting to something we cannot see. Let me share a story. Her name was Joyce, a vibrant woman in her late 70s who adored music. She would hum along to old jazz records, even in the hospital. But one morning, her daughter came in and found her completely silent. No music playing, no humming. Just Joyce, lying still, eyes closed, a soft smile on her lips. She didn't respond to greetings, didn't open her eyes even when her granddaughter held her hand. At first, the family panicked, but I assured them this was not a problem to solve. It was a passage to witness. That afternoon, her daughter simply sat by her side, brushing her mother's hair with gentle strokes, whispering old family stories. She thought her mother couldn't hear. But when she mentioned a summer memory, Joyce's favorite picnic spot, Joyce's eyes fluttered open just briefly, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. Even in silence, she was listening, feeling, present. If your loved one begins to withdraw in this way, don't be afraid. Don't rush to fix it. Don't assume you're being shut out. Instead, meet them in the silence. Sit close. Hold their hand. Read aloud. Speak softly. Be a presence, not a pressure. Sometimes, the most sacred moments happen when no words are spoken at all. This sign, this stillness, is not the end. It's the beginning of letting go. It's the soul preparing to cross gently, without fear, without noise. And now we come to the final sign, one that may seem strange, even a little eerie, but it carries meaning if you're willing to listen between the lines. Sometimes, in the final days or hours, a person begins to speak in strange ways. Not in confusion, but in patterns, in phrases, often whispered, sometimes repeated again and again. I need to go home. They're waiting for me. The train is coming. It's almost time. I remember one gentleman, a soft-spoken farmer named Ed, who spent his final day repeating, "Check the gate, check the gate." His son, a little unnerved, asked me, "Is this normal? What gate is he talking about?" But Ed was calm, not frightened. His voice was steady, even peaceful. Later that night, just before passing, he looked toward the window and said, "It's open now." And then, nothing more. These kinds of phrases, symbolic, rhythmic, often unrelated to anything happening in the room, aren't necessarily hallucinations. They're not always confusion. In fact, many times they come from somewhere deep inside. Some doctors refer to this as metaphorical language of the dying. Others see it as the subconscious creating images that help the mind and body transition. I see it as the soul trying to communicate something it can't put into everyday words. Think about it. At the end of life, the body is doing something it's never done before. The brain, the heart, the spirit, they're all in unfamiliar territory. And sometimes, the only way they know how to express what's happening is through metaphor. For the dying, "I'm going home" doesn't always mean a literal house. It might mean peace, rest, reunion. "The train is coming" might not be nonsense. It might be the only way they can describe the feeling of being carried away. And even if we don't understand it fully, there is meaning there. Not for us to translate, but to honor. If your loved one begins repeating a strange phrase near the end, resist the urge to correct them or pull them back to reality. Instead, stay with them. Repeat it gently with them if they seem comforted. Ask softly, "Are you feeling ready?" Or, "Do you feel safe?" One daughter I worked with told me her mother spent her last night saying, "I'm packing my bags." At first, it made her cry. But then she leaned in and said, "I hope it's a beautiful trip, Mom." Her mother smiled and passed just before sunrise. These final words may not always make sense to the living, but they don't have to. They're not for us. They're the final poetry of a life that's almost complete. And if we listen, without fear, without judgment, we might just hear what they really mean. I'm not afraid. I'm ready. Goodbye. What we've talked about today may not be easy to hear, but it's important. Because the end of life, though filled with uncertainty, doesn't have to be filled with fear. When we learn to recognize these quiet signs, the sudden calm, the unseen conversations, the final wishes, the silent withdrawal, and the mysterious words, we gain something powerful, the chance to respond with love, not panic, with presence, not pressure. Too often, families look back and say, "I wish I had understood what that moment meant." But you don't have to wait until it's too late. You can begin now, by listening differently, sitting longer, saying less, and letting your loved one lead, even in their final moments. Because sometimes, the greatest gift we can offer isn't a cure. It's dignity, stillness, a safe space to let go. And in giving them that gift, we often receive something in return. a kind of peace that lives on long after they've gone. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We'd really love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us one thing you took away from this video and how you're planning to use it in your life. Your thoughts truly matter to us, and reading your comments gives us the energy to keep going. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who might need it.